Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the latest episode of the Enneagram in a Movie podcast, where we talk about the Enneagram and movies, thus the name, and particularly how the different profiles are reflected in the movies. And we're working our way through the subtypes. And this time, we're going to be talking. I got to tell you something. I just love this movie, right? I love this movie. I loved it when we saw it in the theater, and I had not seen it since, which is, I don't know what. At least, maybe 15 years ago it was out in the theater?
18.
18. Oh, there you go. And then just watching it again last night, I just couldn't get over how sweet this movie was. And we're going to talk about the movie WALL-E and the preserving subtype of the two. Now, TJ Ingrassia, you have kids. Were they old enough to see WALL-E when it came out? Was this a movie that played in your home?
Let's see, 2008, so neither of my children were alive at that point.
There you go. So they missed the theatrical debut then.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sure we watched it at home at some point, but not in the theaters.
Okay. This movie was a big thing in our house. My second son just fell in love with WALL-E and had, for a hot minute, right? I mean, he was 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever. So it didn't last that long, but he really was enamored of WALL-E. TJ Dawe, what's your experience with the movie?
I'm broadcasting from Winnipeg, Manitoba, where I'm here for the Winnipeg Fringe Festival, and this is the exact time of year when this movie came out, because I remember seeing it in the theaters in Winnipeg.
Wow.
I don't have kids. I was seeing it because it's Pixar, and Pixar has enough credit in the bank that I'll go see it no matter what. And this is probably my favorite movie of theirs. It just hit me in the heart then and has every time since. I've seen it a handful of times over the years since. My esteem for it never diminishes. Yeah. I just love this thing to pieces. Yeah. And it moves me so much. And even as I'm watching it, I find myself somewhat confused by that. But it still hits me every time.
Confused that you're moved by it?
Yeah.
That something could move you, or that this particular movie moves you?
That robots can move me this much.
Yeah.
Inanimate objects that barely speak.
Yeah. And that, for me, was the power of this movie, right? Because they are robots. And for the first 20 minutes or so, there's only a few spoken words. And yet, it's so sweet and so tender and so touching. Really a remarkable piece of storytelling, I think.
And prophecy, I might add.
I was going to say even more prescient today than it was at that time, but we'll come back to that point, okay? So, but TJ Dawe, why don't you tell us tell us about WALL-E?
So, here's the synopsis. So, as we mentioned, this came out in 2008. It is a Pixar movie. It was directed by Andrew Stanton. It takes place about 700 years into the future. And Earth is a wasteland of nothing but garbage, and a single robot called WALL-E, voiced by Ben Burtt, the legendary sound designer Ben Burtt, who has a cockroach as a companion, not an cute animated cockroach, just a regular old cockroach who seems to be doing just fine.
And is indestructible, too, because WALL-E keeps running him over, and he keeps popping back up.
It's a great gag, like how hard is it to actually kill a cockroach when you want to, much less when you don't. But there doesn't seem to be any animal life, any plant life, any fungal life. There are other robots, and they're all destroyed, or they've just run aground. So WALL-E goes around gathering garbage, compacting it into cubes, and then stacking these cubes into skyscraper-sized piles. And then one day a rocket lands, and it releases a probe droid who is called Eve, or Eva, voiced by Elisa Knight. And WALL-E follows her around and befriends her, and then she scans things and eventually scans a single living plant that WALL-E has found. And she kind of goes berserk and takes the plant inside her and goes into stasis mode and won't respond to anything. And then after a certain amount of time, we don't really know how long, quite a while, the rocket returns, picks her up. WALL-E hangs onto the outside of the rocket as it goes into space, across the solar system, maybe to another one. We're not quite sure, but they come to the Axiom, a great big spaceship where there are thousands of humans living in lazy comfort. And the ship has been programmed to return to Earth when it receives proof that life has become sustainable. But there's a counter-program to prevent exactly that, because the cleanup program that WALL-E is part of has proved to be completely inadequate. So the ship's captain, helped by WALL-E and Eva, eventually overcome this counter-program, They return to Earth with all the thousands humans on the Axiom, and they resettle and pledge themselves to help restore the Earth to fruition. And as the camera pulls away, right at the end of the movie, we see even more growing plants on a hillside in the distance.
Yeah. TJ Ingrassia, you made a point about the movie being, I'm not sure the word you used. I think I used
prophetic.
The word prophetic. There you go. Thank you. So say more about that. What way do you mean that?
Well, what's the first ironic thing that struck me is that, so for many years, Steve Jobs was he bought Pixar from George Lucas in the 80s. He, made himself CEO. He was part of the Toy Story when the company got launched, yada, yada, yada. He sold it to Disney in 2006. Okay, he sells in 2006. Apple releases the iPhone in 2007. This movie comes out in 2008. And the movie is essentially about humans that have outsourced their brains and their bodies to screens that they sit in front of 24/7 and live their entire life through screens.
Yes.
Which Steve Jobs ushered into the world in 2007. Now, if it wasn't him, somebody else probably would have done it,
right.
Not as well and slower. But I just was really struck by, many of the prophetic things, but just the fact that there's some ironic, just a beautifully ironic truth in what Apple unleashed on us.
Yeah.
And then just the automation, everything that's happening with AI the last few years, that seemed like science fiction fantasy in 2008 is quickly becoming, that kind of world in which humans, can't walk anymore because they've outsourced so much to the machines is not quite so crazy anymore.
Yeah, we've got this, the humans have this huge weight. They're all very large, and
they're like giant babies, basically.
Yes, and with very low bone density, right? So they're getting fatter and less bone density as going on, to the point where there's a gag of some of them kind of falling out of their chairs and not being able to get back up, and all these things. I think if you watched this movie and Idiocracy as a double feature, you would have a pretty good understanding of the human condition or the potential dangers of life in America today, right? So, very, very prophetic that way. I also really enjoyed, since we're, kind of going down some movie trivia history rabbit holes here, great references to 2001: A Space Odyssey. Obviously, with the wheel character, it was basically designed to look like Hal from 2001, who kind of took over, and also the invocation of "Thus Spake Zarathustra," right? Which I thought was interesting because in 2001, that piece of music plays when the proto-humans discovered.
Star Child.
Yeah, the Star. Was it there, or was it when they were killing each other with the bones?
Both.
I think it's both.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's both, right. Yeah, so it was kind of like that moment where we're discovering technology and the dangers of it. But in WALL-E, they played it, to signal rebellion from the tyranny of technology, which I thought was a really nice touch, right? So it was kind of closing that loop, I thought. And I will say this as a parent, the fear was always, you go back 5 years and the big fear was these kids are just going to live their whole life facing screens and stuff. But I'm starting to see this kind of rebellion against that, at least in my sons and their peers of, yeah, sure, they still use the screens. The phones are an integral part of their lives, but they go out and hang out, right? They go out and do things socially. There is this desire to get off of the screen and out into the world. So there are budding shoots of hope, I guess.
Yeah, the other irony of 2001 is, it's the opening of all of these proto-humans worshiping at the altar of this giant black rectangle, right. Touching it and caressing it lovingly.
Yes.
Kubrick was onto something.
Yeah.
He just didn't know it.
TJ Dawe, you look like you want to say something.
Well, I think a commonality between both WALL-E and 2001 is they're both about preserving.
Yeah. Say more.
There's a lot of preserving themes in 2001 that show you things they don't necessarily need to show, like how do they get gravity in space? What do people eat in space? It shows, there's this long shot of this astronaut jogging in a circle around the ship. Now, part of that's just the feat of like, how did we do this, which is incredible, but it's also showing like, you need to stay in shape in space.
Yeah.
And how do you go to the bathroom? There's even a quick shot of that where a guy is looking at the instruction on the bathroom in zero gravity. So, yeah, and as well as like proto-humans discovering tools, like what's the significance of that? The most famous jump cut in film history is throwing up the bone and cut to a spaceship in the exact same position in space. It is the same.
Yeah.
It's just a more sophisticated tool.
Yeah. There's also what I found interesting to talk about this preserving thing a little further. There is both the concern about having enough and the dangers of overindulgence, right? And this is one of the challenges in the preserving domain is, do I hoard and have everything I could ever possibly need, or do I be minimalist, or do I worry about running out? Right, and we see kind of all of that in here, right? The corporate entity is called By and Large, right? We see all this space detritus and these signs and stores back on Earth from By and Large, and the gigantic big gulp sort of drinks that they're drinking. It's even, what was it, some kind of liquid food that made me.
Everything they consume is liquid.
Yeah, lunch in a cup, it was called, at one point, right? So. So again, it's this overindulgence that feels like it's feeding the preserving need, but actually undermines the preserving need by doing too much, right? I mean, these people were not going to have long lifespans, given their situation there, probably. Anyway, so really interesting allusions to the demands of preserving. Let's talk about what was two-ish about this movie. Who wants to start?
Well, Wall-E's love of beauty is a big thing. The very first thing we hear in the movie is a song from the musical Hello, Dolly, I think it is.
Yeah, Hello, Dolly.
Which I haven't seen in its entirety. But it came out in the late 60s, and I believe it was a throwback then. Like it takes place in the 1910s or 1920s, and the lyrics are deliberately kind of earnest and sentimental and even corny. And this is something Wall-E watches from an old VHS copy and then listens to as he goes about his life. But he's got this love of beauty. There's no irony to his love of this corny old musical. He hums it as he works. He plays it as he goes around. There's one scene when the clouds briefly part and he gets a glimpse of the stars in the sky, and he's just so moved by that. And then later when he hitches a ride on the rocket to stay with Eva, he gets to see space in its entirety and just glories in it. So there's this great love of beauty that you often see with twos, this desire to be touched right in the heart.
Yeah. TJ Ingrassia, what was two-ish to you?
Well, I think if you have to boil it down, obviously striving to feel connected. Well, there's an ironic, how do we find two-ish things in a film that's a cartoon with non-human characters who basically don't speak?
Right.
But still this desire to be connected is just, that's what Wall-E is all about. He's watching that clip from Hello Dolly, and it's when the characters hold hands, which apparently was not actually in Hello Dolly. And for Wall-E, they staged that because they wanted to emphasize that connection.
I did not know that. Yeah.
So he's fixated on their holding hands, and then him holding hands with Eva is a big recurring theme throughout the film.
Right.
And so he's alone. He's got this cockroach. You don't get the sense. It's not like he's marveling at the stars. He has this vast collection of artifacts that he's collected from his. He finds an interesting thing on the ground. He picks it up. He stores it, and he keeps it in his home for later. But so it's not like, in a way that if a human was stranded on a desert island, we might see their emotions and their longing to be connected to someone. But there is this longing that's fulfilled instantly when Eva arrives, because he attaches himself to her like a barnacle,
yes.
Metaphorically and almost literally, in the sense he attaches to the spaceship when they go up. And the rest of the film is just him trying to continue to be connected to Eva at all cost.
Yeah.
So that's the heart of it.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the line from the prophet, when they say, speak to us of religion. And he says, have we spoke this day of aught else, right? I mean, everything about this movie was about striving to feel connected. Okay? And this idea of hand-holding, that's a great anecdote that the hand-holding was not in the original movie, because it is that central theme, right? And it's about this need for contact that all humans have, but this is what's really going on at a deep level with type 2s. And people tend to get caught up in the helpfulness and the doing things for other people and being of service. And yes, we see that in Wall-E, but those things are in service of a need to connect, a need to feel what the other person is feeling in some way, which again, at least with Wall-E, his eyes moved, there was a whole lot more movement, but with Eve, she was basically an egg, right? But they still managed to capture emotions with her, which was just fascinating to me.
Mario, there's not a doubt in my mind you're familiar with the pathetic fallacy.
The what fallacy? Go ahead.
Oh, maybe not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Pathetic
fallacy.
I didn't.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So it's not the way the word pathetic is usually used, meaning something that we look down on.
Yeah.
Meaning it's the tendency to attribute human feelings to non-human animals or objects. Mm-hmm. It's something we have a very hard time not doing.
Yeah.
If we didn't have that fallacy as just part of the way we operate, this movie would not have been made, because it wouldn't make any sense. It would just be like filming a toaster on wheels for a couple of hours. Yeah. You just would not get emotionally involved in it. Right. Although even as I say that, you might just project human emotions onto a little literal toaster on wheels that didn't emote, didn't make a sound.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Look, this is the story of Disney, right? I mean, whether it's cars or animals or whatever it is, it's the story of Disney and Pixar and all these things that I almost said praise on that tendency. It's not, but taps in to that tendency that we all have. To do that, right? You're right. I wasn't familiar with that term before. We could almost say, or I would think of it as anthropomorphizing things, right? Sort of making things that are not human in our mind. And it's this gift that humans have. I mean, you think about the smiley face, right? Which is basically a circle with two dots and a semicircle in it, right? But we see a face. And with Wall-E, there was more expressiveness there than certainly with Eve. But even with Eve and the cockroach, I mean, the cockroach, to my recollection, they didn't show a face, right? But still, we felt like we knew what the cockroach was feeling. Okay.
It's really interesting that they didn't go the route of, say, Jiminy Cricket, to really have a human-looking insect or a human-looking robot. Like, they could have articulated his features way more than they did. Wall-E is animated as if he's an actual physical object, so the eyes don't contort into different shapes to reveal human emotion in a way that we recognize, and yet we can't not see human emotion in this physical object.
Right. Yeah. All right, so anything else was two-ish?
Well, just to lean in a little bit more, you mentioned it briefly, but there's Wall-E's desire to connect with Eva. That doesn't just happen, because initially she's indifferent to him. Yeah. In fact, she's even hostile. Like, is that noise that I heard a threat? And she can shoot blaster fire out of her arm. And so he overcomes the fear of being destroyed and just keeps doing things to try to reach out to her. And like a silent film character, he's actually really hapless. Like, all these bits of physical comedy happen that result in him getting clobbered, like this huge number of shopping carts cascade down the stairs and smash him into a door, or a huge number of pipes fall on him after he's made a representation of Eva out of objects, so that when she wakes up, she sees this artwork that is her, and she's indifferent to it, and he's just kind of, and then all these pipes come and clobber him. Or when she takes the plant into herself and goes into stasis mode, he does everything he can to try and revive her and try and make sure that connection is still there. Like, and like takes her places. Like, is the rocket going to come back?
Right.
What do I do? And like sits with her outside in the rain holding an umbrella, which gets struck by lightning. And then the next umbrella immediately gets struck by lightning. He makes a boat and rows her through this filthy canal. He takes her to watch the sunset and wraps Christmas lights around her. Like, this is somebody who just isn't taking no for an answer.
Right. Right.
In a healthy way. You know, we'll see less healthy versions of that in a movie like Misery.
Yeah, right. Or the cable
It's
guy.
a little
or
less
something.
Glenn Close
Yeah,
in
right.
Fatal Attraction, not taking no for an answer.
Right, right.
But here it's appropriate. And like he goes the extra mile, which is something you will see with twos and something that I have known twos who love rom-coms, because so often rom-coms involve the grand gesture, some big public declaration or stunt or performance or something that says, hey, I want to be connected with you forever. That's Wally.
Yeah. TJ Ingrassia, anything two-ish that you want to add here?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's a little tough because of the nature of the film. It's not, so many of the other films we've picked, it's, first of all, humans doing human things that are more directly relatable. So this one's a little more of a high level, I think, but it's still, it's very obvious. There may not be as many of the nuances exactly to point to, but at a high level, striving to feel connected, obviously.
Yeah, you can't point to lines of dialogue that, portrayed, unless he said Eva in a particularly two-ish way or something, right? So,
Well, he did, though. He's usually, at least when she goes into stasis mode, then gets taken away. The way he says her name is often like, "What? No, don't leave me.
Yes. Yeah.
Be safe. I must make sure that you're okay."
Right.
Eva!
Right.
Like, there's just all these variations the way he says it, but there's so much emotion in it.
Yeah. It really did remind me of some of the silent movies and the great silent movie actors, the Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, that sort of thing, where they could just convey so much without speaking. A true gift. When we talk about the Enneagram types, we talk about each one of them having a particular gift that they bring. And the gift we describe for the type 2 is humanity. It's this ability to see the human in people, to see the human in situations, to remember and to shine a light on the not just the individual, but what is human and real about them, what's precious about them, what needs protection about them. And for me, this movie had as much humanity as anything I've ever seen, right? And, to the point we've been making, they're robots. They're inanimate objects, theoretically, expressing all the best of humanity, which is a remarkable feat.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about it till you said that, but in some ways the robots are almost more humans than the humans in this film. And I think that's probably intentional now that you say that.
Yes. And they served as the reminder. I mean, in a sense, they were the rescuers of the humans and reminding them what it meant to be human. Pretty cool stuff. So let's talk about preserving. So preserving is a focus on getting our fundamental needs met, right? And when I say fundamental needs, I'm talking more about, I don't want to just say it's the material needs, because it's not just material needs, but it's things having to do with security, safety, well-being, being fully resourced, being risk averse very often, or at least managing risks sensibly. What did you see in this movie that fell into that category?
Here's a really minor one. Wally recharges his batteries with solar panels. And there's a scene when he was
eco-friendly, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Well, and sustainable.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where he's slept all night, and then when he wakes up, he's groggy, very much like a person would be. He's bumping into things and kind of stumbly. And then he goes outside, opens his solar panels, gets a full charge, makes the max sound, la, that his battery's been recharged. And then he's got the energy of somebody who's just had their morning coffee and they are ready to face the day. You don't have to be a preserver. I'd say most people have that experience.
Right.
But in preservers in particular, that is a magic thing. Yeah. Getting my coffee in the morning just the way I want it, or my tea, or whatever the drink of choice is. Oh, and now I feel okay.
Yeah. Good. TJ Ingrassia?
Yeah, we already talked about his hoarding of artifacts. There's something about, you don't get the sense he's necessarily, it's not explicit that he's like trying to preserve the history of humanity or something. But there is, that does feel like a very preserving thing. Like, ooh, this is an interesting artifact. I'm going to save this and have it has a place.
Yes.
And somehow we will remember because I have saved this thing.
Yes.
So the behavior is there even if it's not, explicit why he's doing it.
There's often a sentimentality in preservers, right? It's this need to hold on to things, to capture things, to be able to relive them or re-experience them in some way. One of the things I see in a lot of preservers is a tendency to take a lot of pictures or to scrapbook or to store things. And again, there's not all of them, but there is that tendency. And, prior to digital film, where everybody started keeping all their pictures on the camera, one of the things that was always kind of a leading indicator of preservers to me is you would walk into their house and you would see the refrigerator covered with pictures of people. Right, photographs and that sort of thing. And my wife had that, and lots of preserves I knew, and I would call it the preserving Hall of Fame, right, where they would just have these pictures and it was just, I like these memories being there, right? I like to be able, and my wife's saying this, she's a maniacal picture taker, and it drives all my sons and me crazy, and she'll say to me, look, someday when you're even older than you are now, you're not going to remember these things, but you'll be able to look at the picture and you'll still have them, right? And again, that's a very preserving thing. And this is what we see in Wally, right? He's collecting all these things, and we see him when he's out gathering the trash. He's got his little lunch cooler that he carries with him, and he'll find something that catches his interest, and he'll toss it into the cooler and then take it home and store it in his, complex shelving system that he has there. And this comes in handy, right? Because there's a couple of times when his eyes get smashed and he's got to go to the drawer and reach it. Don't worry, I got this taken care of. I got one of those, I can pull it back. And whereas somebody who was more minimalist or not really attuned to their preserving domain, they'd be walking around with one eye for the rest of their life, and the preserver's saying, see, I told you it was worth saving this thing for 30 years. So this is the thing we see over and over again. Okay, with Wally, it's the preserving. And it's funny because it also almost speaks to how individual and specific preserving can be for different people. When he finds that engagement ring in the case still, and he opens it up and he takes the ring and he looks at it and tosses it aside, but he's fascinated with the box that it was in and stores that, right? So again, when people start acting out the preserving, they're not all preserving the same things in the same way. They can look very different in people depending on what seems to matter to them.
Well, just to build on something you mentioned there, Wally's got really good practical know-how, which is something we often see with preservers. We talked about that specifically in the Preserving 8 episode with Nick Offerman's character in The Last of Us. But Wally has no problem repairing himself.
Yes.
Like you said, he's got parts stored up, or sometimes he'll find one just by the side of the road where he's going. It's like, oh, my treads are worn out. There's a robot with the same treads, installs them like that. Very practical of like, I know how to sustain myself. I know how to maintain myself. I know how to make use of the materials that I have around me to keep what I need and to install them.
Yeah. There were some other things. I mean, even the whole idea of the spaceship, the Atrium, right? It was called
the Axiom.
Axiom. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry. With the Axiom, that was an attempt to preserve human life, right? But the Earth is not sustainable anymore, so we have to send people out, and you can come back when it is safe to come back, right? And here we've set up these mechanisms and so forth. And it was good to see Fred Willard. I always love when Fred Willard pops up as the only recognizable human. But and it also demonstrated how our attempts to satisfy one of the instinctual biases can actually undermine our skillfulness in that. Because even though it was this very elaborate, I mean, this was a huge spaceship, again, it was not making humans that, as they were, would really survive anywhere other than that ship, right? I mean, they just, they couldn't even get up off of their floating lounge chairs most of the time. And there was that great line with those two when they got knocked out of their chair and they touched hands. This was interesting. There were the two humans when they got knocked out of the chairs. There was this transformative moment when they actually touched hands. Right? And then it's like they started to wake up, and it's like, oh, I didn't know we had a pool here, right? Even though there were all these thousands of people sitting around the pool, they just hadn't noticed. But it was that power of connection that brings us back to reality and to the human experience.
Yeah, the axiom is basically us comforting ourselves to death, which is a real shadow of preserving, as you were saying. Of like, I like the things that make me feel good. I like wearing something comfortable. I like eating something delicious. I like, being taken care of and all of that. And there's a real tendency or a temptation to take it too far, to take it to the point where I can't do anything more. Or where, as anybody's experienced, too much of a good thing stops being a good thing. Now, we don't see these people as unsatisfied with their lives, although there is an early scene where two guys are in chairs and they're talking through their screens to each other, and we find out they're actually right next to each other. And they're talking about, what do you want to do? Do you want to hit some golf balls? No, we did that yesterday. Oh, well, we got to find something to do. And later we see that what they mean by hitting golf balls is just doing it on a video screen, and a little robot is actually hitting the golf ball. So it's like, how satisfied is anyone? Like, superficially, their needs are being taken care of, but like, does anybody experience real joy? Does anybody experience ecstatic joy? Does anybody thrive in this? It really doesn't seem like it.
Right.
Well, the captain says at one point he's fighting with Otto because Otto was trying to sabotage the plan because the Earth is uninhabitable. And what does he say? He says, I don't want to survive. I want to live. Yeah. And so there is this awakening to like, this is not life. This is not living. We need to go back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's preserving right there.
So we can plant those pizza trees. Which gets to the the practicality that you talked about, TJ, right? These people, these are people who had really lost touch with how do you function.
He didn't know how to open the book. He didn't know what a book was at that point.
Right. Yeah, the machine had to come and do it for him. That's great.
But then he becomes fascinated by the very science of plant growth, which was new to him.
Yeah.
And, there's this beautiful scene where the captain's asking the computer all these questions about the Earth, about the sea. Like, he wants to know all of these things. And then when they finally get to Earth, he plants that plant and is like showing it to children and is really excited about it. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy for them. Like, the Earth is devastated, even though, like I said, we do see some.
Oh, these people are all going to die on Earth. There's no way they're going to survive.
They're going to scamper right back onto the axiom and
but
live
Wally
there.
and Eva will be just fine.
And the cockroach.
Right.
But also just what has happened to the Earth. Like, the implication is this company, by and large, which seems a proxy for Walmart or now Amazon, has taken over the Earth. And one really quick detail is the Fred Willard character wasn't just the president of by and large, he was the president of the Earth.
Right.
Of like, this company has taken over the world. Yeah. But basically it's this desire like that most of us have now, and I don't accept myself from that, of like, hey, just click of a button, you can get what you want. Easy. Wonderful.
We get 3 or 4 Amazon deliveries a day at our house. I mean, it's just crazy, right? And or DoorDash or something like that. And it doesn't mean we don't go out and buy things at the mall too, but yeah.
Mall? What's a mall?
But that's the world we're living in now. And you're right, because there's one of these things where, again, there are times when, I go into the bathroom and I'm like, oh, crap, I'm out of deodorant, right? And so it's like, I can drive to the store. I can just go on Walmart and order 12 sticks of deodorant, and have them there and not have to worry about it anymore, or get them from Amazon. And we know that, okay, this isn't sustainable, right? This is not going to end in a good place. But man, oh man, do I love having my deodorant show up at my front door the next day, right? So it's the trap of the human condition, or at least lazy humans like me. So.
And what animal on Earth, human or not, would refuse resources being provided to them quickly whenever they want it?
Right.
Like, that's we evolved in very difficult circumstances. So, of course, we would seize on something that we want that's easy to get. And you can take it too far to the point that we consume our planet to death. So that's the wasteland that the movie opens in, that we see like 700 years from now. This is what we have wrought.
Right. So let's talk about the preserving too. And it's interesting because usually in the past few movies, at least, we've talked about how difficult it was to separate out the instinctual bias and the type. I think it was a little easier in this case, right? Because there were two such distinct themes, and one really seemed to be related to the instinctual bias and the other to the strategy. But if I look at Wally as a preserving two subtype, and okay, what's the difference there between a navigating two and a transmitting two? So we say connected preserving, right? Okay, boom. What does that mean? Well, it's this interdependency that he didn't have, but he longed for in Eva. And then it all became about us being tightly bound to get our needs met in a way, right? And to protect each other, to help each other, to take care of each other. And this is what the preserving two is looking like. It's like I want somebody that I can connect to deeply. And now that one of the challenges in the Enneagram literature is that people can say, oh, they have this need to connect to somebody really deeply. That's a one-to-one character, or that's a sexual subtype, or whatever it is. No, what we see in preservers, because look, there wasn't anything really sexual in the relation. I don't know how they'd have done that anyway, but it didn't seem like it was a sexual, hot, Glenn Close kind of character. It was more, I'll be okay if I have you with me. And this is what we see in the preserving relationships very often, and particularly the preserving two. I'll do for you because I know you'll be there to be there for me when I need you. And so that's the kind of the situation that the preserving two is. I get frustrated when I hear people say, oh, they're giving to get about twos. Well, show me somebody who's not. But it really is about this mutual survival, this mutual thriving to the degree we can. But I want to do it with somebody so that they'll be there for me. And so I'm going to be there for them to increase the probability that they're going to be there for me. Other thoughts about the preserving two in this case?
Well, one thing is Wally's domicile, which I believe is in the inside of a rusted-out tank or something like that, something really sturdy. But as we've talked about, he's got all these rotating racks for all of the items that he collects. He's also got Christmas lights set up and other twinkly lights. Mm-hmm. Like, it's beautiful when it doesn't need to be. Something that we see happens is there are massive dust storms that just take over. So he also needs this as a place to shelter, even though he's a robot. Like, theoretically, if he gets infused with dust, that would stop him from being able to function altogether. And the landscape is scattered with other models of his own kind of robot that aren't functioning anymore. So again, we talked about this with the Preserving 8 with Nick Offerman and Last of Us. I think in general, that's something you often see with preserving characters is how important their living space is to them. Yeah. So it's not just something he's carved out that's practical, even though he's a robot. It's something that's an expression of him. It's comfortable, it's beautiful, and it's something that he likes to share with Eva. Yeah. So he takes her there when there's a sandstorm coming and she doesn't understand what it is. But like, we can shelter in here. We will be okay in here, as well as I have spare parts in here.
Yeah. Go ahead, TJ.
Well, so I was going to ask, so some of the stuff you guys are talking about in the book Instinctual Leadership, actually, you talk about how sometimes preserving twos can be confused with sixes. And some of the stuff we've been talking about could even sound six-ish and apply, he's gathering all these things and sort of hoarding these memories and holding on. And part of the relationship is, I'll be safe with you, you'll be safe with me, we're going to protect each other, which could sound six-ish. Yeah. So help me unpack that. Like, what's the distinction there, and how do we, it's a stretch because it's robots and they're not speaking, but...
No, It's an excellent question. And
So how do we differentiate those two, basically?
It's a very common mistyping. And as with all things related to identifying somebody or some things, Enneagram type, we have to look at the pattern over time. Okay. And we have to look at what seems to be serving what, rather than just what are the behaviors, because the behaviors are very similar, right? It's that there is this anxiety, and this is something you see in all preservers, and all preservers, or many preservers, can be at times look six-ish because they're concerned about their security and well-being and the resources, and so they have a higher tendency to worry about those things, and worry about those things is more visible than worrying about where I fit into the world kind of thing, right? So many preservers are misidentified with sixes. When you combine that with this need to connect, and it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, right? Which is there first? How am I getting my preserving needs met? Okay, well, I'm connecting to people. A preserving six, they're preserving, and they're going to have this double whammy of need for security. So the relationship that they have to other people tends not to be as visibly emotion-based as Wally's is with Eva, right? You can see this longing in the two that you generally don't see quite as much as the six. And in sixes, you can see the anxiety more than you do in Wally, right? And the preserving too. So it really is kind of, if we're looking at the bar graph here, where are the levels, right? Is it more around this thing for security? Is it more around this thing for connection, and so forth? So very, very similar, but when you see it, you start to say, oh yeah, that's that, and that's that.
Before Eva's arrival, Wally's pretty carefree.
Yeah.
Even though he's in an environment that's fraught with danger. You don't see him spend 1 second's worth of energy on is something going to topple on me?
Yeah. He's not C-3PO.
Right.
Right? Right?
Yeah, that's a preserving six robot.
Right, exactly. Right. So you can see a qualitative difference between those two.
Also, a lot of the objects that Wally collects have no practical value. They're beautiful, or there's just things that interest him. Yeah. But it's hard to imagine a Rubik's Cube or a spork being valuable to him, or a rings box. It's just, I like this. I think it's pretty, and then I'll bring it home and put it in my collection of many other similar things, just because I like it.
Yeah.
Not that a six wouldn't inherently do that, but I would imagine a six's collections would be dominantly practical.
Probably,
especially in a post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't want to imply that sixes don't enjoy beauty and aesthetics and that sort of thing, but there is a difference in those. And the way I think of it is there's more of a romance in the two, generally, than there is in the six, right? So, because I was trying to wrap my head around this thing around beauty, and I think the beauty for the two represents this romance in a way, right? This, I'm feeling something that the artist or the person who created this or that others are experiencing, right? It's a shared emotional state that they're after, in a way that, again, a preserving six might not quite resonate with in the same way.
Yeah, there's almost a loving connection he has with the things, and before Eva shows up, he's alone.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thought experiment, how does someone who's striving to feel connected express themselves when they are alone and have no one to connect with? So it's almost like he's connecting with this collection of things that he's lovingly fostering.
Yeah, connecting with a spork. Oh. All right, great. Okay, so anything else about preserving two-ness, preserving twos that we want to comment on here before we start looking at other characters?
I think we covered it.
Okay. All right. So other characters, thoughts on Eve or Eva? It was kind of the European pronunciation of Eve. But any thoughts on her Enneagram type?
3 or a 9. Those are my guesses.
Oh, uh-huh.
So she is clean and efficient and proficient. She's very task-oriented, all very 3 things.
Mm-hmm.
She's also completely friendly and unpretentious once she realizes you're not a physical threat. So could be 9, but 3 and 9 have a connection. Could be a 3 with a lot of 9 going on. Could be a 9 with some 3 going on. Anyway.
Yeah. Be interesting. Yeah. TJ?
I was thinking maybe there's sort of an 8-ish vibe that she had. You know, she has a not literally, but metaphorically, sort of a soft underbelly. She definitely connects and has a reciprocal love with Wally by the end of the film, but she doesn't fuck around.
Yeah.
And she'll blast you, off the face of the planet if you threaten her in any slight way.
Yeah.
But these are very So we're stretching it pretty thin here to assign a personality to her.
Yeah, well, first of all, I agree on the stretching it thin part. I was kind of leaning towards 8 as well, but there was that cleanness and that mission drivenness that does seem 3-ish there. That I would say, and and again, there was for me this combination of being kind of a badass and also having this soft side that also felt a little bit 8-ish for me as well. So, but again, we're talking about a robot that's shaped like an egg with arms. So
the perfect woman.
All right. Any other characters? Pretty just short on characters. I'm just going to go so far as to say that pretty much all the humans were distorted and stereotypical versions of 9s, right? The sloth and the laziness of just kind of sitting around and that sort of thing. But an unfair depiction of 9s, but at their worst. I don't know. Any other thoughts?
I'd say also the movie's got a fat-phobic streak that hasn't aged tremendously well. There are fat people who are active and smart and idealistic. The analogy of being giant babies, I think, really works. Well, there are also babies of all shapes and sizes. Yeah. So I do not want to make it seem like I'm okay with maligning fat people as one of like they're all lazy and self-centered and careless and oblivious. That is not the case.
And not all lazy people are fat, right? So it works both ways.
One question I had is how they never get out of their chairs. How are these people reproducing? The two people touch hands at one point, so it's like, oh, human connection. This is a new thing. How are we keeping humanity alive for 700 years? Something's going on there.
Yeah, well, there was kind of this baby ward that was, who knows what was going on in there, right? It might have been some, genetic splicing or something that was happening. So, yeah, an unanswered question.
Also, how do they get their food? Like we see them ejecting garbage. This is not a closed system.
Right.
How do they get their energy?
Right.
It's not really science fiction. It's more space fantasy. We don't need to, how do they have gravity? How does the ship tilt at one point when you're in outer space? Again, it's like, we fixed it with the what's-it machine.
Yeah. Yes. There was also sound in space, which doesn't happen as well. Yeah. So, there's certainly some bones to pick with, this science and logic related to this.
Probably not the point that they had in mind when they made the film.
Exactly. It's like, all right, come on, guys, lighten up. Suspend disbelief here, right? So lions don't talk either, so.
It is a cartoon.
All right, good. Let's see. I don't know. The Fred Willard character had kind of a 7-ish feel to me, but
he's almost always a 7,
exactly.
Isn't he?
Yeah. So
there's a story about a mighty wind because his character would just do these great rants. He was just so funny in that. Christopher Guest said every time he called cut, Fred Willard would look at him and say, I wasn't done. You could just reel off comedic gold like as long as you wanted.
Right.
He's just such a treasure. I'm so happy when I see him in anything.
Yeah, agreed. What would this been like if it was a navigating 2 instead of a preserving 2?
Probably would have adapted more readily to the mores of the robots and people on the Axiom. Like, Wally just continues to be Wally on the Axiom. He's dirty, he's friendly. But I don't think it would have been that different.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And same thing with transmitting too, right? I mean, it probably would have been a bit more intense and even a little creepier. The stalking would have been a little bit creepier, but yeah, I think that, probably not dramatically different given the circumstances of the situation.
I can imagine a transmitter of any type, if they were in Wally's situation, like before Eva arrives, wouldn't necessarily have been putting these cubes into arbitrary shapes. They might have been making a statue of themselves or a work of art or, something that says, me.
Right.
Check me out. I exist. Right. Even if there's nobody to see it. Yeah. Maybe someday there will be.
Yeah. With the shape of a hot chick robot or something. Right?
Okay. Desperate times call for desperate measures.
Or maybe he would have been writing his own musical. He would have been watching that one and thinking like, oh, okay, I want to do that.
Yeah. All right. So other preserving twos in movies. TJ, Dawe, you always have a list of these. What would you come up with?
So here's a bunch that we've talked about in other episodes. There's Paul Rudd's character in I Love You, Man. There's Donna Reed in It's a Wonderful Life. Neil Patrick Harris's character in Gone Girl. The mom in A Christmas Story. Sandy in Grease. Dina Burns, played by Blythe Danner in Meet the Parents. And Guillermo de la Cruz in What We Do in the Shadows. Mm. So here's a bunch that we haven't talked about, and there's a big heading to a bunch of these is somebody's mother. Mm. Hollywood sure loves making somebody's mother a preserving too. So there's Joe Pesci's mother in Goodfellas, played by Martin Scorsese's actual mother. Yeah. They show up after murdering somebody with some flimsy story, and in the middle of the night she gets up to make them pasta and beans and entertain them. All friendly. Here's my painting. Take a look. There's Helen Hunt's mother in As Good as It Gets. Maybe Helen Hunt herself in As Good as It Gets. Could be a 6, could be a 2. I'm not sure. Forrest Gump's mother in Forrest Gump. Ruth Fisher, the mom on 6 Feet Under. Amanda Wingfield in The Glass Menagerie. Paula Proctor, who's a supporting character and a mom in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Just a wonderful 2. Nicole Kidman's character in Lion. Reese Witherspoon in Little Fires Everywhere. Mrs. Fletcher, played by Kathryn Hahn in the miniseries Mrs. Fletcher. Rosemary in Rosemary's Baby. And Ann Archer in pretty much every role she ever played, including in Fatal Attraction, Patriot Games, and Shortcuts.
Were there any men on your list?
Not in that one.
Okay.
But here's one coming up.
Gotcha.
Either of you seen the movie The Founder about McDonald's?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So there's the 2 brothers.
Uh-huh.
Michael Keaton plays Ray Kroc, but then there's the 2 McDonald brothers, and one of them is Mac McDonald, played by John Carroll Lynch. Mm-hmm. Very much a 2. There's also Julia Child in Julie and Julia, played by Meryl Streep, and Kathy Bates' character in Misery.
Yeah. Again, a stereotypical 2 personality style, but I want to be really, really clear that not all preserving 2s are women. Okay, so it's just that movies do deal in cliches and stereotypes and typecasting and all these sort of things, and so that is a profile that's going to resonate more as a woman, and so it'll be harder to find male 2s as examples, or male preserving 2s as examples.
And harder to find transmitting 8 females in films and depictions.
Yeah, exactly. Or type 5 females very often. So,
I think in general, women get raised as if being a 2 is the best thing they could be, or the only thing, particularly a preserving 2, somebody who takes care of everybody, somebody who puts themselves last, somebody who cooks and cleans for everybody else. And some people are more likely to take to that than others, even if that's their type. Or not their type. So I think there's probably a lot of women out there who have mistyped as 2s or as preserving 2s.
And or just preservers, right? Again,
right.
The preserving domain is kind of socially in many cultures the expectation of what a woman is supposed to address. And very often there's mistyping of women who think they're preservers when they're not, and often guilt that women feel when they're not preserving and don't care about that stuff because of the societal expectations. I also want to say that there's a school of thought that the preserving 2 is not caring and helpful about other people, which I just don't see.
How is that even possible?
It's what people who say they teach the Naranjo approach tend to say, that it's a more selfish personality style who wants to be taken care of rather than take care of others. In my experience, pretty much every preserving two I've interacted with does want to be taken care of, but one of the ways that they ensure they do that is by focus on taking care of others as well. So be careful about that stereotype, listener.
Do you know the logic behind that argument?
I've heard something about it being a counter type or something so it doesn't do the same thing that the others do. I think that it's just a situation of either using some really kind of psychologically damaged examples and or mistyping as sixes. So, or mistyping sixes in this case. But anyway, that's an aside.
It sounds like it's more the argument from authority than anything else.
For sure.
Like this important person said so, therefore, all right, let's make it work.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, with that, folks, next time we are going to continue our march through the subtypes, and we still have a couple of twos to get to and some other types. Feels like we've been doing these for a long time, but we do have 27 episodes or 27 characters to cover, and this has been fun. So I look forward to continuing with this. And listeners, please check out our other podcasts, or I'll say my other podcast in this case, part of the Awareness to Action Podcast Network. The Enneagram, that's this one. So the Awareness
the flagship podcast.
The flagship podcast. And this was the first. This was the first of my podcast. So, but the ATA Enneagram podcast and the newly begun Thinking Well and Why podcast, which is all about clear thinking skills and the Enneagram. So you can find them wherever you get your podcasts. TJ and TJ, it's great to talk as always, and we'll see you next time.
See you soon.